and welcome to the CLM podcast. I'm your host Nadia, and if you like your craft podcasts with a little bit of gardening on the side, then this podcast is for you. Coming up on today's podcast is a wonderful interview with none other than the hat architect herself, Woolly Wormhead. So it's time to settle in with some dedicated you time, grab your crafty projects and a cuppa, and enjoy today's show. First of all, a big hello and welcome to season 2 of the podcast, which is in part sponsored by the wonderful Ellie and Ada yarn. If you're a new listener, come on in and have a nosy around the blog, Ravelry and social media. And for returning listeners, it's lovely to have you all back again and joining in with the show. Can you believe it? We're back after a short break and the madness of this year's Blog Awards. And yes, you did hear me right. A few of season 2 episodes are sponsored by Laura, aka the wonderful indie dyer behind Ellie and Ada yarns. So please pop over to her Etsy shop and show your appreciation. And if you missed it because you only follow the podcast, Laura dyed me a wonderful sock yarn for my blog birthday, and it's called Garnet, and that is a really gorgeous red, which you can see only from Laura, and that's on etsy.com/Ellie and Ada. If you do have time and you like the show, I would love it if you could pop over to iTunes and leave a review so that you could help this podcast reach even more craft-loving people. And if you like the podcast, please share the podcast on whatever social media you use and let us know what you think. Now, I am very excited to bring season 2 on the air. I never thought when I started that I would be recording past 12 episodes, let alone a whole season. So I thought to kick off a rather special season 2 that we could go back to where it all began and catch up with one of my favourite designers, Woolly Wormhead. Woolly was my very first guest on the show that I ever interviewed, and I'm sure that you could all tell how nervous I was and how we should never record in a ballroom, and that it isn't a very nice way to treat your guests if you have to climb into a wardrobe to record. So if you want to know why I love Woolly so much and why she's one of my favourite designers, then please pop on over and have a listen to episode 3 of season 1, and I will give you a hint. You get a really good view of how her wonderful knitting brain works. She very kindly found time in her schedule to come back on the show to chat about her latest hat collection, which is her Elemental collection. We also got to chat about what she's been up to in the last 12 months and what's in store in the future for Woolly. We dive right into the meaty questions from the start, so I hope you are settled and comfortable. Please let me introduce the hat architect herself, Woolly Wormhead. Hi Woolly, welcome to the show.
Hi Nadia, and thanks for having me back.
Hey, it's been almost a year since we chatted, actually.
Wow.
I know. So you were coming on today to chat about your Elemental collection.
Yes, my brand new set of hats that I'm pretty excited about.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about the Elemental collection, where the idea came from and what inspired you?
I certainly can. The Elemental hat started as an exploration into working with short rows and colour work sideways. Kind of like what I wanted to do was to do what you see in shawls, but to do in hats. So you know all these fantastic shawls you see with kind of and a lot of the short row patterns you see are kind of like leaf forms and things, but they're always on a flat environment. You know the kind of things I mean. And I wanted to try and kind of put them into hats and think about how different it would be to work on a piece of fabric that's not flat, because a hat's obviously not like it's very different to a shawl or a cowl in that way. But I also wanted to kind of like try and find or explore other ways of creating colour work with the short rows. So we wanted to. There's some leaf forms in Elemental, those kind of little pod-like shapes that you kind of see when the short rows form. But there's also other things in there, and that's what I wanted to do, was to try and see how far I could push that.
Oh, because I really love the way that they are inspired by the last Airbender, because that's one of the favourite of ours over here.
Yeah.
And you've worked that really, really well with the colour work for each of the elements.
Yeah, that did work out really well. That's Aaron, my son, is also a big fan of Avatar. Actually, I've got to say that Tom, my partner, is too. It's they're both kind of like watching it all the time. So I think I absorbed an awful lot more of that than I realised. But it seemed to fit perfectly well. The idea of kind of like there's the four elements, then there's the fifth element, which is the balance or the ether, or however you kind of like view that, and that's the Avatar series. And so I was able to kind of take each element and think about the colors and think about the forms that the short rows were kind of creating, and the way they represent kind of like the key points of an element, when it's especially when it's turned sideways onto the hat. And then for the Avatar was an element of each. It's like a combination of the elements together.
And how long did it take for the collection to come to completion from when you started?
Um, not not as long as other collections have taken, actually, because this one, I don't know, I was having a period when I wanted to turn myself off the internet. Things were all getting too much. I think, right, I need to kind of turn Twitter off and just turn all the things off and sit in the studio and focus. And it turned into a really positive time, because I think I'd got all of the patterns designed and knitted in something like 7 or 8 weeks, which is not that long at all, really, when you think that's from scratch, completely from scratch. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do conceptually when I kind of spoke to kind of like Carol and the Yarn Collective about the ideas that I had and how the yarns and everything worked. But I actually worked completely from scratch with the designing of the charts and knitting the hats into, about 7 or 8 weeks. That's just, it's mad when I think about it. Actually, it was really quick.
And did the Bloomsbury Decay behave the way that you wanted it to, or did you find that you had to wangle that into getting those short rows and everything into the shapes that you wanted?
No, it behaved beautifully. It was everything I wanted in yarns for this collection. When I sat down, I was talking to Carol. I mean, I think I first mentioned the idea to her when we were at Edinburgh Yarn Festival earlier in the year, and I'd actually one of the things I wanted to do when I was at Edinburgh, when I had the chance, which I didn't get because I was so busy teaching, but I wanted to wander around and find a good solid merino DK that had a nice tonal range of colours that I could bring together. Because when they're part of the same family, they work so much better for this kind of work. And it's exactly what I was looking for, but I couldn't find it at the show. And it just kind of happened to mention it to Carol, and she going, "Well, what about the Bloomsbury DK?" And I was just like, yeah, that's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And it's a really gorgeous yarn. It behaves so beautifully.
You had the idea before the yarn and then you tested the yarn, or did you see the yarn and then went, "Oh, I'll go with this collection"?
Yes, I saw the yarn. I just thought, yeah, we'll go with this. This was just, I didn't have any doubts at all that the yarn would be perfect for what I was trying to do, and it is. It worked brilliantly.
Oh, I love that. I love when you find a yarn that just it's what you have in your head and finally
Yeah,
it's in your hand.
yeah. No, that was a really good thing. And when, of course, the colours came through and they were all the right kind of all on the same tones. I mean, they're very Carol as well. The colours, they're beautiful. And she'd done a really good job of working those out, and they came together so perfectly. The way that I was able to put the different colours that you wouldn't necessarily put together in a larger garment or something, they worked really nicely for the hat.
Oh, but that's why you love hats. I mean, it's why I
Yeah.
love hats. You can just do whatever you want. What is the most challenging thing that you encountered with this collection? Because it's quite different for you, isn't it?
I've worked sideways a lot. So that was kind of like, it felt like I was just back in my kind of natural place. So that was fine. What was challenging, there were a couple of aspects. Because when I work sideways, especially when I work sideways, I always chart everything up front, because when you're working sideways on a hat, you work a little bit of the brim and a little bit of the body and a little bit of the crown at the same time. So it's all incorporated in one chart, and it's really good to get it sorted before you even cast on. So I wanted to get the chart done, and getting the short rows balanced was the first hurdle, and that took a long time. So by balance, I mean that, I don't know, you've got a short row form in one section, you've got to balance it out in another part of the panel to make sure that that area's got the same number of rows throughout, so that the fabric doesn't distort. So that was a big task, especially because I was also incorporating the crown shaping and the brim shaping at the same time. And it was, I really got into it because I guess it's like a lot of things with design. It's not what you put in, it's what you take out. So I'd be able to put all of this kind of these short rows in and think about, that section's balanced there, that section's balanced there. And then the next stage is then refining it and finding more elegant solutions to what you need to do to balance and create the shaping. And that was actually where it got really, really interesting. And then I'd kind of like knit the first panel or knit one or two panels to see whether or not it actually looked as strong in the flesh as it did on the chart. So some of them I had to keep going back to the drawing board to kind of refine them further. But yeah, that was it. I gave myself eye strain, I think, doing that, because you're concentrating. Unfortunately, I've got my monitor turned sideways, so I've got the charts up really, really big, so much easier to see. But you're sitting there counting the rows, making sure that everything's kind of like all lined up and the short row placements are all correct. And it was just like, yeah, that was probably the hardest.
You can't tell, but I am absolutely beaming listening to you talk about that. You can just tell how much you love it from.
Oh yeah, I did. I really enjoyed the process. I really did enjoy the process.
It is the process for you as opposed to the finished object.
Yeah, I'm a process designer as well as a process knitter. It has to please me and tick sort of like several boxes in my head while I'm actually doing it. Otherwise, the finished hat, I never love it as much. I mean, I'm with the elemental hats, I'm really, really pleased with the end result, how they all look. And we really enjoyed doing the photography of that and working with Beth, our model, and she hand carves all her own jewellery that you can see in the photographs. And it was really nice to kind of place all of her pieces of jewellery with the theme of the element and also the environment and things that we placed around it. That was all a really nice part, but none of those would have felt as if it was really coming together if I hadn't been happy with the process of how the hat came to be in the first place, I
think my favourite one of those photography shots is actually for Opal. It's the way that her eye colour matches the hat, and then you can see her kind of jewellery, and you've got the like purple and blue kind of background. I love that particular shot because you can see the hat design and the construction and exactly like the sideways technique shown really, really well with the colours. It's just everything about that one. That's my favourite one. So that leads me to ask, what's your favourite from the collection and why?
Oh, this is so hard to answer. It's always the question, which one is your favourite? Cora was the first one that I designed. I actually went back and changed the design after I'd done a couple more to refine it further. So Cora felt like it was like a little bit of a breakthrough. It felt like it was a stepping stone into somewhere where I wanted to go. Then I designed Toff, and that changed the entire collection. It was going to be quite different from what it ended up being. But Toff, I don't know, Toff fell into place. It was actually one of the easiest ones to design. And it flowed so well. And that just kind of sparked lots of things in my head and completely changed the direction of the collection. And for that, I think it's still a pretty special hat. But Azula was also another one that really, really came together in a really, really interesting way. And I was really pleased with the way that the flames on that one have got such a realistic effect. So, yeah.
Is it when design like that often goes off on a tangent very different from where you started? Do you just go with it as you're inspired, or will you just stop and go back?
No, I'll go with it. I'll go with it because if it's gone that way, it feels more kind of, I don't know, intuitive, like it's meant to be that way, rather than try. I don't want to try and fight it, not unless I know in my head I've calculated a particular kind of way that I want to work and have a very refined idea of what I want the end piece to look like. But if I don't have that, then I'll just run with it. I like that. I like that organic part of designing.
So with the design of this collection, the last time we got to speak was about woolly toppers for kids. And how do you feel that you have evolved between the two collections?
Well, the last year's been kind of like a huge leap. massive leap. Did we? I'm trying to remember when we talked about painting blue stuff as a kid. Did I mention the new collection that was going to be coming out about the circles? I might have done, mightn't I?
Yes.
That's so because that was Circled felt like that was the kind of collection that turned a fresh corner, and it feels like it's been accelerating since then. Not in a kind of like something that I've got to try and run and keep up with kind of way, in a quite refreshing sort of like, yeah, we're definitely going in a new direction here, and I really, really like it way. And I think the last year has probably seen more change, more confidence in what I'm doing, more certainty about where I want to go, and a good boost to business generally than I think I've seen in any other year that I've been doing this. And I've been doing it 12 years now. So yeah, this year's been pretty special.
And are you more of your creative self this year? Is more
Yeah.
designing about what you want to be?
Yeah. It definitely feels like that. I think, I mean, I know personally as a family, we've had a really difficult few years, and I think it's taken us a while to come out the other side of that. And I think that's what's happening, is that I'm coming out the other side of that, and there's been some lessons that I maybe not haven't processed as fully as I think I have about actually, sometimes when you just kind of have to shut some doors and just think to yourself subconsciously that actually this time's for me now. And I think that's what's been happening. I've just been able to kind of like give myself the space that I needed. Does that make sense? Does that sound like gibberish?
It does, because I didn't fully understand it until one of the things I didn't realize about knitwear design is how isolating it can be sometimes, because no one can do that work for you except yourself. So you have to keep motivated yourself. You have to be your inspiration. You have to be your own kind of editor. At the same, you have to be everything all at once, and it's very draining.
It is very, very draining, and it's not just the creativity. You've got to balance up all the business and admin side of things. And for us, I mean, I, we've spoken about this before. I pay the rent. I put the food on the tables. I'm the only wage earner, so there's that responsibility that goes with it as well. And you have to balance those things up. And when you're kind of going through a dip or a period of difficulty that's kind of impacting on your creativity, it's also impacting on business too. So there's a lot of it that can be quite hard, especially when you're on your own and you have to keep forcing your way through it.
Yeah, because it's I do this thing where I'll like turn on my email to send someone a message, and then you've turned on your email and you realize that there's like X number of emails that you haven't replied to, and then you get stressed, and then you get sucked into the funnel, and it's that was a new experience for me.
Yeah, you have to kind of try and I don't know, set yourself times for only answer email. I was actually kind of like talking to Alison at Yarnporium this weekend, and she was saying that she's kind of like approaching it in a different way. Rather than having her notifications all the time for her email, instead of it kind of like push notifications, she's now doing as a pull. She grabs them when she's got the space to grab them. I thought, well, yeah, that's smart. You're controlling when you kind of when you interact with the outside world, which is what we should all be doing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yes, it's hard because we're in this industry and we're working on our own a lot. However, we sometimes need to do that to kind of like be able to indulge ourselves in the creative side and break through those things and our those barriers and work through it. Because sometimes that's the other side of the problem, is that we're all online so much, we're all trying to do so much and communicate with everybody, that we can't kind of give some things the focus that we want to give them. So it's balancing that, I think. It's quite tricky.
Hey, if you figured that out, let me know. I always appear like I'm balanced, but inside sometimes it's just like quiet chaos. Like there's me silently screaming over a void.
I do know exactly what you mean.
The one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about Elemental Collection, actually I have two, is if someone has never knitted one of your hats before, which one would you recommend for them?
Well, the first one, an elemental to try, would be opal. I think opal or katara. They're the less challenging ones. They kind of give you a gentle introduction to what you're doing with the short rows, to be able to navigate your way around. I'd suggest Azula last. Yeah, that one's kind of like so choppy and changey. You can't get into a rhythm with a Zulu. It's much, much harder. Whereas Opal has got a nice, smooth rhythm, which kind of like fits the elements really. Air is kind of like generally the calming element, and fire, it can be pretty out there.
It's true. And with this collection, you released it as an ebook and one single pattern. Was that because the pattern didn't quite fit with the collection, or was that to give people a taste of what the collection was about? Or
Well, the single pattern is actually kind of separate from Elemental. It's on the same theme, and it's really, really interesting, that single pattern, because that's actually where the idea first started. And so the first things that I actually wanted to do when I was first sort of like exploring this idea of doing short row color work, I wanted to do these stripes, and I wanted to do offset stripes, and I had like the ideas that I wanted to do. And when Toff changed everything, I kind of figured that actually the best thing to do was to release the single pattern outside of the 5, but with it at the same time, so that would be a good one to kind of continue the technique. But it just felt very, very different in its concept. I mean, funnily enough, that was originally Tom had actually originally given that one name of Toff because it looks like tufted grass, and he was like exploring kind of links between names and languages and things. And that's actually where that was actually the first one was actually called Toff. And then the Toff as we have it now kind of just changed everything, and that got the name moved, and we kind of refigured things out. So it's not part of the Elemental 5, but it's part of the same collection in the short row color work.
and I am actually reading your questions right now, but if because you have been designing for 12 years, what has been the biggest change that you've seen in the industry for designers? It's quite a bit different question. Sorry.
That is a huge question. I think one of the biggest changes I've seen has been something that's happened in the last few years, where designers now they don't feel as if they have to kind of fit into a particular space within the industry. We're creating our own space now. I mean, one of the things that I used to feel pressured about, not necessarily a huge way, but I was always something aware of, is that designers work like this, and this is how patterns were produced, and you fit in around the yarn companies, and you do this and you do that, and digital wasn't so big, and there weren't as many indie designers, and it felt like we didn't really have our own space. That was something that we were still just there to serve other people rather than us designing for the sake of designing. It's kind of like designs themselves were often undervalued when you kind of look historically at the way that yarn companies used to sort of treat designs. They were just there to sell yarn rather than like looking at the design for what it is. And I think we've carved out a space now where we're able to do that. We've got our own standards. We are working towards kind of like individually, everybody's working towards being more professional and thinking about what they're presenting, and photography is like improved loads, and pattern writing and the layout, loads and loads of things have all been coming together, and we've got our own space now, and we're collaborating. It's a much more even balance with yarn companies and knitters, and yeah, I think that's a really, really good thing, is that indie designers have more presence. Does that make sense?
It does. There's definitely been, at least when I remember it, you would generally think of knitting patterns from big design houses, whereas now there's such a wealth of indie designers who do have pride in what they do. So everything is professionally finished, and they're doing it to the highest standard that they possibly can. And I know now when I'm looking for patterns that the first place I go is to an indie designer, and then to the house second. So it's there is a lot more choice, and I love seeing that kind of online community that's grown up around it as well, because it's kind of done without borders as well.
Yes, exactly, and in lots and lots of ways, very small, little, subtle, gentle ways, indie designers have also been moving the direction of patterns in general. I mean, I don't know, years and years ago from knit and pattern books, there'd never be schematics for garments, but they are now. I think that's something that it may well be the knitters are sort of saying to indie designers, look, we've been saying that we want this and it's not been happening, and indie designers saying, okay, cool, let's do that. And it's now that's been filtering through, and those things are now becoming the standard rather than the rarity. So there's been lots of really good changes that have been happening like that.
I think it's as well that customers can kind of speak to you directly as well. There's no middleman.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no metaphorical wall, or there's nothing there as an obstacle. You can still, and designers are listening too.
It's exactly, and I think it's almost hard not to, because people will tell you exactly what they're thinking and they'll do it in real time.
Exactly. But there's also one of the hardest things when you're working independently and you're working with your customers directly is actually hear an awful lot of things that people want, and you have to filter that out and kind of think, well, actually, that's not practical, that's not realistic. I want to kind of like achieve everybody's wish list, but I can't please everybody at the same time. So, you have to kind of do a lot of filtering out, but it means that we can hear those things. And I think that's such a good thing.
I really love it. Which brings me to, this year is your 10th MCAL, am I right?
It is indeed. It's kind of like 10 years of running the Mystery Cow.
This is exciting. I'm excited.
It is exciting. And yeah, it is really, really exciting. There was a point a couple of months back where I almost thought, this can't happen. This is so daunting and overwhelming that I've been doing this for 10 years and like, what do I do? But no, it's coming together, and it's coming together really, really well. I'm really happy with what's going on. And I've switched up this year, and there's doing things a little bit differently. People that regularly knit my Mystery Cow will know that we have a format for how and when the installments are released. And this year I've changed the number of installments and I've changed the date. So I've switched that up. Having got everybody used to running on a certain day, I've now got to change it all. We've got 2 patterns this year, and last year we had more than one pattern. They were all related, and these 2 are completely different patterns. The only thing they have in common is that they are the same yarn weight, funnily enough. That's all they've got in common. They're both sports weight. DK will work fine as well, but they're both sports weight. We've got one that's knitted bottom up. We've got one that's knitted bottom down. There's a bit of lace. There's a bit of colour work. There's a bit of travelling stitches. There's all sorts of different things going on. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this.
And I don't know if you can answer, but is it 2 distinct separate hats, or can you knit sections from like hat 2 with hat 1, or?
No, they are 2 distinct separate hats because they're both constructed in different directions, so you wouldn't be able to kind of swap the elements over. So yeah, there's 2 different directions going on.
Ooh, I'm excited now. And sign-ups are on October 10th.
Yes.
And then the first clue is released when?
1st of November.
1st of November.
Can I mention the yarn companies that I'm working with for this as well?
Yes, you can.
Okay. One of the hats is in Carol Feller's Nua, which is really lovely. You know Nua as well, don't you? It's a beautiful, lovely kind of subtly tweedy kind of, it's got that kind of like rustic feel to it. So, and the colours again, Carol's brilliant at designing colours for yarns, and they all blend together really, really nicely. They all match and marry so well. So Nua is one of the recommended yarns for one of the hats. And the other one is Miss Bab's 3-ply Yummy, which is a hand-dyed, nice kind of springy merino. It's a really nice texture to it. It gives really fantastic stitch definition. And that's the other yarn sponsor for one of the other hats. They're both really lovely yarns. They're very, very different.
Yeah.
They are very, very different. And it's really nice to bring those 2 things together and publish the patterns alongside each other. I think it's going to be really interesting this year.
I wish you could see me right now. I'm very intrigued. Yeah, I really want to see what Nua looks like in a hat, because I've only done a garment and a cowl. I might have to try that one. My hands are kind of going, oh, but I also like the sounds of Babs yarn too. Yeah, you see, choice. You shouldn't give knitters choice.
The Nua is really nice in a hat. It's very, very light and warm. It's really airy. I mean, the Miss Babs Yummy 3-plies are really nice, springy merino, and it feels heavier than the Nua. So they're very, very different in that way. But the Nua is just, yeah, it's really soft and gentle to wear. And it looks lovely.
Yeah, I know what's going to happen. You're going to release it. I'm going to look at it, and then I'm going to be standing in This Is Knit, and it's going to be Nua, and then I'm going to be trying to look at at other yarns that will substitute in for Babs, because I make my decision on the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like, oh, and then I'll probably just get both, which normally happens anyway. But
Um, both hats, by the way, are available as a bundle, so you can get them a little bit cheaper as a discount, and I'm making them available for in-store sales so that shops can knit along too.
that's interesting. And that's done through Ravelry, isn't it?
That's all done through Ravelry. Yeah, I've been opening it up to local yarn stores for a couple of years, and it's nice because, like, you can go along to your knit group at your local yarn shop, and you can knit together there, and it helps the shop out as well. So
I like that. I do. I definitely think Lee's have gotten better at doing in-store sales and stuff like that as well. And the support through that program. I like it, I have to say.
yeah,
But that I would say
yeah.
that. But the one of the other questions I have for you on your MCAT was, this year are you running like a mystery prize for people who complete before the end date, or I think last year you kept it a mystery until the end, am I right?
I have got some prizes for people that complete by the end date. Yes, they are. I will probably share them at some point. I managed to get hold of some pretty special skeins of hand-dyed yarn over the summer that are not repeatable and you'll never find again. And they're really beautiful skeins. So they're going to be some of the prizes. Yes, so there will be some. And I might reveal them. I don't know.
We'll see what mood you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought I would. I haven't photographed them yet because and I haven't kind of said to everybody yet that we have got lots and lots of prizes because I don't know. I think I ran out of time on that one, to be totally honest with you. But I might well get them photographed and get them up on the blog and say, actually, you can win one of these little beauties because they're pretty special.
And if people want to see you in person, where are you teaching next this year?
My November teaching dates, I have got a weekend of teaching at Pearlescence towards the end of November. Let me just pull up my calendar quickly. I think that's the 25th and 26th of November. And the weekend before that, which is going to be the 17th, 18th, is I'm teaching a little mini retreat in Lyme Regis with Devon Sun Yarns. And I was there. I was the guest teacher for a retreat there last year, and it's a really, really nice, chilled, friendly event, and it's fantastic. I'm not sure if there's any places left on that though, so you might want to go to the Devon Sun Yarns website and have a look to see if the retreat's sold out. But that's really nice because it's Lyme Regis. It's a really, really beautiful place. And I really, really like kind of seaside towns or coastal towns in winter. There's something rather special about the atmosphere there. So it's definitely worth going for that. And yes, that whole weekend at Pearlescence on sideways knitting and grafting, my favourite subjects.
And are they your last teaching dates for this year?
They are for this year, yes. Yes. And it's just been announced that I'm teaching at Edinburgh Yarn Festival again in March. So there's always that.
I'm trying to figure out if I can go. I'm trying to work out childcare. So hopefully by the time this goes live, I can say if I'm going without my husband looking shocked, which is how we found out last year. Okay, so that brings me to, and I really don't want to ask you the last question because it's fun talking to you, but it's what's in the future for Woolly then, 2018.
Well, we're going to have a big inspirational trip and we're going to India. I'm taking the family to India for a month and I can't wait. And I want to know what my brain's going to do with all the information that I see out there and how it processes it all, especially the architecture, because like that's something that really, really appeals to me. But I have in the planning stages another collection, small collection of hats. I really, really like this idea of working with 4 or 5 hats because you can really flesh things out. You can really kind of delve into a design rather than thinking that you've got 10 and you've got to kind of stretch it. You can really go much deeper into design when there's fewer of them. It feels like a real luxury to be able to do that. And the next designs I'm working on are sideways. They use 2 colours, a bit like, so Elementals really kicked off something in my head, this idea of working with the sideways, 2 colours, short rows and things. But these ones are possibly going to be exploring more some of the ideas that I initially had before Elementals kind of became what it did, of exploring some line through short rows with colour. But some of these are going to be, again, a different construction method. Yes, they're sideways, but they're going to be different.
See, I have this image where you and Carol got talking and she infected you with sideways knitting, and you've now just gone off on a tangent.
Well, my first book 10 years ago was sideways knit hats.
Wow.
So I've been knitting sideways for a long, long time. Yeah. Before I knew Carol, I think it was Ravelry had only been a thing for a few months before I listed my first book on there. That's how long I've been exploring sideways knitting.
So then when you see something like circles, it throws a different aspect on sideways knitting for you then, and obviously you then explore it through many different
yes.
I don't want to say aspects because that just sounds like it's the wrong word, but it seems like each collection is building. That sounds so, it makes my eye twitch saying that, but it's like each one is building on the last, but it's like there's something in the last collection that is almost like a change that kind of stays with you and niggles with you, and then it evolves into the next one. Because if you start at your very first pattern, and little baby Aaron, and you move through your collection, you can kind of see the process and you evolving as a designer. And I really enjoyed that when, like, you can tell someone really, really loves something.
Yeah, it shows in their work.
When it really shines through like that. And I really do think your collections do that. But yeah, your trip to India, I see lots of different types of knitting from you in the future.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to do. I mean, my reason for going to India is, apart from the fact that we've only ever had one other family holiday, so we need one, we deserve one. But it's because I want to go for the silver and the textiles. That's exactly my way. Because like silver's my other passion besides textiles, and Indian silver is just kind of like the way they make their work is just pretty amazing. So I don't know what I'm going to bring back from it. I think there's going to be quite an overload for a while. But I know colour will be a thing, although colour's not a huge influencer in what I do. 3D form is, architecture is, line, spacing, proportion, or they're all things that kind of tick my brain. And I'm hoping to have a complete overload and just absorb so many things that you'd never get the opportunity to do. I'm really looking forward to being overwhelmed.
I really, really hope you have an amazing time. And I can't believe it's been 30, almost 40 minutes. So I'm going to have to say goodbye, and thank you so much for coming back on the show and catching up with me.
Thank you for having me back. I've really enjoyed sitting and talking to you.
Yeah, I always enjoy seeing design through your eyes. It's just amazing thing. Enjoy your trip, and hopefully you'll come back on the show and chat again when the next collection's out.
I'd be more than happy to.
Yay. Hello and welcome back. Isn't Woolly fantastic? If you would like to find out what Woolly is up to, you can find out more information on her website, www.woollywormhead.com, and she is also on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and of course all of the links of today's show will be in the show notes on cottagenotebook.ie. I will be back in 2 weeks with another fantastic episode all about Dublin's first ever yarn festival, Woolin. So trust me, you won't want to miss that episode if you are more than excited about what's going to happen in May 2018. You can find out more information about me, the blog, the podcast on cottagenotebook.ie, and thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. I'm your host Nadia, and I hope you are feeling inspired to grow, craft, and love. See you next time. Bye bye.